Okay, hello everyone. We should go to the first slide, committing content from working memory to long-term memory. And this presentation takes place as we proceed with our days of foreign languages at the University of Zielona Góra. So this is my topic for today. I hope I will be able to squeeze the presentation into the framing of the time allotted to me, allotted to my slot. So first things first, memory is the mental space to store or process information. I say store or process because storing is dealt with by one type of memory, and processing data, ongoing processing, in another kind of memory, as we shall see. But the main purpose of my presentation is again to show you my insights into how content from your working memory that you are currently using for ongoing thought, how that content is to be shifted into long-term memory. Okay, you will excuse me my changed voice, but I have had some bronchial problems and still having to cope with it. So memory, as we have seen, is the mental space to store and process information. We deal with sensory memory in the moment. We shall discuss that working memory and long-term memory. Sensory memory and working memory come to form just one broader category of memory, which is short-term memory, because it's not long-lasting. So this is the sequence of my presentation today. First, I'm going to talk about sensory memory a little bit, not too much, but to draw a map of the issues showing where we are situated as we consider committal from working to long-term memory. So sensory memory first, then in passing very quickly working memory for a moment, and then long-term memory, and subsequently working memory revisited more extensively. The reason why I'm presenting this way is for discursive purposes. I just thought it would be more comprehensibly presented this way. And at the end, I'm going to share some ideas of how content, your thinkings may be transferred from working memory to long-term memory, with some theory to go with it, with some practical tips to go with it. So sensory memory, it's about our senses, our eyes, our ears, in language learning and academic learning, basically about eyes and ears. Quite often when you go to the sciences, also about touching, smell, occasionally perhaps taste. So sensory memory, let's for example focus on the eyes, on the sight organ, the eye. You have the incoming information, you know what, about 100 billion photons. These are the light particles, which by the way only exist in motion, they don't exist in static condition. So about 100 billion photons reach your eye retina each moment, and this is what sensory memory does. Our brains are incapable of extensively dealing with such a bulk of information, and so filtering takes place as the first step of our neural system dealing with what comes in. So we hear things, we see things, and it is these things are, after being filtered away, initially they are held in sensory memory for a very short period of time, and this serves a purpose. Look at this. It stores sensory data temporarily to assemble meaningful wholes from sequentially incoming signals. So I'm going to play this 5-second video, and I want you to look at how the dot is moving, and you sort of see a circle, or it's more oval, but let's say it's a circle. Why do you, if I had been moving it even faster, the pointer, the laser pointer, you would be seeing the circle even more clearly and not intermittently. Well, the fact is that each moment you only see the dot occupying one particular point along the circumference of the circle, at one point. But your sensory memory, that's how our brains have been designed to deal with it, the sensory memory stores all the locations of the dot for a few moments, so that it can present to you, see again, the image of a geometrical figure, something like oval, circle, if I can talk about oval circles. So this is what sensory memory does. And when it comes to language learning, look at the left. You have now sensory memory receives in a sequence, in a chronological sequence, usually, especially when you listen to speech. But when you are reading, it's partly in a sequence, partly holistically perceived words. I'm not going into that. Anyway, your vision detects these graphemes, and they are held in your sensory memory, in your iconic memory, for a moment long enough for you to assemble the sequence sentence. So this is the word which you hear or read, and then so this is what happens in between sensory memory and working memory. And working memory already starts to look for any matches in long-term memory. Do I know this word? What does this question mean? Do I know this word? It means, have I stored in my long-term memory a sequence like this that I can assign meaning to? Okay, so the working memory works out the meaning, does the cognitive labor at this stage, that of identifying the particular form and assigning meaning to it, if I have learned the meaning of it in the past. So sensory memory puts data into working memory. I said I would just mention in passing working memory here, but now let's have a look at long-term memory. This is the memory which stores data permanently. It may be more easily or less easily retrieved upon a need in subsequent occasions, but it is stored permanently. So you may talk about stored images or sensations, like you recognize a particular smell or taste. Yeah? Then you have words and their meanings in your long-term memory. So this is the lexical component and semantic. Rules for language use. This is grammatical, which includes phonological, morphological, and syntactic, and to an extent discursive. Then the rules for behavior, pragmatic. Rules for how to speak in particular a situation, but also rules how to function successfully in social settings. And then you have facts about the world, like Berlin is the capital of Germany, right? Mount Everest is situated in Asia, so this is your encyclopedic memory. And of course, a very vast, if you will, ocean of data in your long-term memory corresponds to your personal experiences. This is your episodic memories, which stores your records of individual situations that you experienced in the past. And propositions, this is something like your thoughts. These are your thoughts, your judgments, your descriptions of something, your attitudes to something. So this is long-term memory. Okay, so far we have said that long-term memory stores data permanently, but this data may be hard to retrieve, especially when a lot of time has elapsed. And we shall discuss factors which affect the ease of retrieval of that. And now you've got your working memory. It is the thinking room. This is your thinking room. So what happens? This is the RAM, or if you like, this is the RAM of your mind. Yeah. So then first you have external input, external sensory input, and there is the filtering away of irrelevant noise. Then there is the segmentation of speech, print, and this data, after being filtered initially, is handed down into working memory. Actually, it's more complex than that, because pathways also go bypassing working memory in part 2, but I'm not going into that. So into working memory, and the working memory says this: oh, let me think, do I know these words? Oh, they have already been segmented between sensory memory and working memory on the way, as it were. Yeah. And do I know? So in order to know whether we know these words or whatever terms and any other components of knowledge, it looks around in long-term memory and says, listen, is there anybody out there? And if there is, then you identify this word as known. Okay. And you put together a few meanings of a few words that you have just heard and retrieved the meanings of from long-term store, and build your understanding in your working memory. That understanding is called proposition, you will remember. And working memory is about matching things. It's about matching things. So I want you to look at these here. Understanding is a kind of recognizing. Do I recognize this word? Yeah. If I don't find a match in my long-term memory, I don't recognize the incoming form. It becomes noise. It becomes noise to me, right? Speech is no more than noise. And we shall talk about the importance of building bridges and relevant retrieval, personal relevance, and using associations just in a few moments. Now, the very important thing is this. You have incoming data into your working memory, going through the filtering and so on and so forth, and it looks for material in long-term memory, and that material must be somehow compatible. So the properties, the features, the properties of the incoming material must be sensibly compatible with the properties of what you have stored in your long-term memory. Only then is there understanding. This is very important. Only then is there understanding. So what happens is this: you have a sentence being read by somebody or to somebody, or being spoken to somebody, and this sentence consists of these lexical items, right? They are received, the irrelevant background noise is filtered away, there is speech segmentation, you recognize individual words. And that happens, what happens in your working memory, you try to build, you assemble a meaningful thought, a meaningful unit of knowledge from what you have just head. And as a result of this cognitive labor, a proposition is built. Proposition is like a thought. These are your thinkings. Water boils at the temperature of 100 degrees Celsius at zero temperature. So this is our understanding, which has been produced in your, as a result of the labor in your working memory at the spur of the incoming sensory data, right? And also on the basis of material consulted in long-term memory. So the train of action is more or less like this. You've got the sensory input, sounds or signs. In language learning, it's mostly about this. When you talk about teaching small kids, that would also involve touching different blocks and things like that. Then you've got segmentation, right? Irrelevant noise or irrelevant blotches on the sheet of paper, they are filtered away, and only the relevant content is segmented into words and phrases and expressions. Then you have in working memory, you have this already mentioned word identification upon consulting the store in a long-term memory. And you recall the meanings of those words that you have just recalled from your long-term memory. And this is what happens. So you build the content, building content in your working memory on the basis of what you hear means understanding. And if you want to store this new piece of knowledge, unit of knowledge, the proposition or the term or the lexical items, the vocabulary, whatever, then you want to move it to long-term memory. This is transferring from short-term store to long-term store, right? So when material has been shifted to long-term memory, then you may say that initially understood material has now been learned. So the rest of this presentation is concerned with what happens between the last two links in the chain, right? Understanding and learning. So this is understanding means building a proposition. For example, on the basis of what you are reading, what you are hearing, what you are listening to. This is understanding. And in working memory. And learning consists in shifting material to long-term memory. Okay, so this is the ultimate end, the ultimate goal of the learning process. Move content to long-term memory in such a way that it will be possible to retrieve on demand, to be able to be retrieved on demand. But we forget things. There have been different theories. You can have a look. I have just selected 4. Trace decay, that said that it just disappears from the brain. I personally don't believe things disappear from the brain, but they are harder to access, or sometimes almost impossible to access. There may be interferences, and so new content may be similar to some more recently learned content, and you will confuse things. Lack of consolidation and retrieval failure. I'm going to focus more on how to strengthen content in long-term memory and how to create conditions favorable for content retrieval back into working memory, as when you are trying to organize your speech or your writing. Okay, then. So how do you commit content from working memory to long-term memory? Well, it stands on two pillars. One is on repetition and one on consolidation. The thing on repetition doesn't talk about the properties of the content, only on the way you are repeating things. Of course, it depends on the kind of content and your personal relationship with that kind of content. But on average, so what I'm saying here doesn't concern each and every case, it's just the averaged model. So when you see a new word or a new idiom or a new physical theorem, or you see a new term or new geographical name, whatever, right? So the first repetition takes place within minutes. So, and the second repetition within 1 hour. And when I say repetition, it's not just looking at the word again and recalling what it means. No, I'm going to, when I'm talking about consolidation, I will say more about this. The third repetition within 24 hours, because it has been shown conclusively that 80% of new content, something we have just learned, will be lost. I don't say neurologically gone from the brain, no, but it will not be accessible. It will be lost from the brain within 24 hours unless you reinforce by revising in meaningful ways. And the fourth repetition within a week, and the fifth repetition within a month, and the sixth repetition, you are getting ready for your exam session. Okay, this is an idealized moment. You will use common sense and you will see what kind of content would be reliably based on this sequence and what content. Just use common sense. On consolidation, on the other hand, you want to build bridges, meaning-bearing links. There have to be links found between new learned content and your cognitive structure. I say it again. There have to be links found or created between the new unit of knowledge, the new content, and your cognitive structure. No such links, no learning. Build associations, trigger the pathways. I'm going to show some illustrations. Roll a snowball. You always want to add new material within the context of what you already know. You know more and more and more. You don't learn atomistically separated excuse me, pieces of knowledge. This is very important. Make your own sentences, teach others, test others. You know, research has shown that you are by far more likely to remember meaningfully, to remember for possible retrieval, things which you have taught to others and on which you have tested others. But I also often insist on making your own sentences, because when you use a new term or a new word and make your own sentence with it, you integrate a new piece of knowledge, the new word, with your general cognitive structure, because you need to recall from your mind the known meanings which are related to the new meaning. In short, you are creating lots of links. So, what about building bridges? A few examples, maybe, like mnemonics. If you see the word indelible, yeah, it may be, oh, this is a new word, I don't know this word. Yeah? But if you look at this key or button, whatever it's a button, I think. Yeah, and on your laptop, on your laptop's keyboard, it says delete. Very often it says DEL, just the first three letters, del, right? And look again at this word, del. You know that in is the negative prefix, and able is such that we can, so indelible will be immediately recognized as meaning such that cannot be deleted, such that cannot be erased. You can have indelible experiences. Something may have had an indelible impression on your memory, and so on. Another example, you want to learn this word rig, oil rig. This is an oil rig. And in this example, I want to invite you to build on your encyclopedic knowledge. Look at you know what the capital of Latvia is. It's Riga. It's Riga, right? It's a coastal city, the capital of Latvia, coastal, and they have oil rigs nearby, offshore, right? So you can easily associate that there is an oil rig, or there are oil rigs off the coastal areas of the city of Riga, and you will associate these. So it may be a little artificial, this link, this association, but I tell you, anything that works is worth trying, right? Another example. When I teach my students about morphology during descriptive grammar classes, morphology looks such complex, I want to first activate the possible links that may exist between their already existing knowledge about the world, perhaps from previous experiences, and the new knowledge to be learned. So I ask this question: when did you get your morphology tested? You know, your doctor commissioned somebody to test your blood for cholesterol, for triglycerides, perhaps, and everything, vitamin D. So this is your morphology, the structure of your blood cells. So morphologies in medicine, each of you will be familiar with morphology in this context. Now what I'm doing is I take this knowledge and I move it into the knowledge of language. So I'm building a bridge between the already existing cognitive resources and the new topical area. Morphology splits wholes into parts. Right, so now we easily see that these here, ology, duo, trans, hept, dets, wide, dem, poly, these are morphemes, the meaning-bearing components of language. And now we very easily have built a meaningful link between previously existing general cognitive structures and new piece of knowledge which is to be built. Okay, so this is, if you find such meaningful bridges that you can build, then you will certainly successfully commit content from working memory to long-term memory. I also mentioned making a snowball. Never learn new things in isolation from what you already know. Always try to see connections. Old content creates context for new words, concepts, structures, knowledge unions. So use continuously continually what you know, and keep adding new content little by little. And look at the very bottom of the slide, all the more important than new. That means don't start in your afternoon studying session in the library or in your study or in your bedroom. Don't start studying new content until you have revised what you have learned today before what you learned yesterday and during this week. Only when you have revised what you have learned recently do you pass on to learn new content, and the new content will be put in the context of what you already know. So you sort of make your knowledge bigger and bigger and bigger. You never lose what's inside. You never lose what's inside the snowball, but you keep adding new content little by little. Not a lot at a time. Your study time should be devoted more, maybe 60-70% to revising what you already know, and 30-40% to new content, like this. And talk about it to others. Teach, test, argue. Look at this. This is very important. Whenever you talk meaningfully using a unit of knowledge, It may be vocabulary item, law of physics, plot of literary work, then geographical name. Then you integrate it with your cognitive architecture. And thanks to this piece of knowledge will be more easily retrieved. Look at this. Rephrasing a known theorem, for example, the second law of thermodynamics in physics, a known theorem is superior to memorizing it mechanically. Yeah? When I was a kid at school, and some teachers said, look, in the test you wrote the truth, Marek, but you didn't put it word by word the way they explained it in the book, so I didn't give you a point. And I don't want to criticize my teachers from 50 years ago, but I wouldn't do it like that if I were if I were in her shoes. So look at the bottom. Using words for meaningful expression is by far superior to mechanical memorizing of word lists. Try to explain something in your own words. Don't memorize mechanically definitions or theorems by heart. If you try to use different words to express the same thing, it will be committed to your long-term memory in a more coherent, in a more orderly fashion. Then you have to mention assimilation and accommodation. Oh, my time is running short. Assimilation, when you are ready to understand, to hear or see and understand. And accommodation, the new piece of knowledge that isn't compatible with your way of thinking about the world. So your way of thinking has to change in this particular fragment of reality. And assimilation, try to look, are there possible bridges that I may tread between the properties of the new content and the content to be learned? So you talk about interlingual transfer and intralingual transfer. Look here, if you learn the past continuous tense, I was studying at 5, it will be easy due to a few factors. First of all, because you know the present continuous already, so it's by analogy. But secondly, also in most native languages, you also have the concept of past progressive, right? On the other hand, accommodation will be likely necessary when you're learning the present perfect, because in the Slavic languages you don't have the present perfect or past perfect. So you have to restructure a certain area of your cognitive structure. This is going to be more challenging. You have to think in a new way for the new unit to kind of snap into the right slot. So I would like to conclude this with 2 theorems. The first, I just read it downright to you. The efficacy, that's where I am, the efficacy of committing new content from working memory to long-term memory is proportional to the amount of transferability from past learning to the new learning task. The more links exist, the more associations have been built with the new thing, then the more easily it will be committed from working to long-term memory. And the second theorem, this is pretty complex, I go through it slowly. The degree of dissimilarity between the properties of cognitive structure and the properties of the new knowledge item is inversely proportional to learning ease, to facilitation. You may want to demolish some walls in the thinking room, if you like, demolish some walls and build new ones along new semantic cuts. And I once wrote in one of my books, and I repeat that the known determines what can be learned, but it is for you to find how they can be linked. The known determines what can be learned, and the learned affects, inevitably, inevitably. The learned affects what has been known. This is more like in accommodation. So the first part of this, the known determines what can be learned, is more about assimilation, and the second part, the learned affects what has been known, is more about accommodation. So thank you and take care. And please wish me speedy recovery. I'm into my 4th week of terrible illness, post-COVID pneumonia. Okay, but I will be leaving Zemboland soon and joining you. Bye bye, guys.